On the offset, I just want to introduce you, but do feel free to add bits. So I think of Vikramjeet as my mentor because we met when he was teaching arts-based therapy, and I think of him as somebody who uses the arts, but especially theater, in a very therapeutic way, both for the personal benefit of, say, a specific person, but also of the community at large, and looking at relevant issues of social rupture, communal rupture, large pains that are held by lots of people at the same time. And I know that he has a keen interest in archetypes and archaeology and Jungian concepts. So that is my understanding of him and his work. But is there anything you would like to add, Vikramji?
So I direct plays also for children and for young adults and also for adults. I'm also a trainer in terms of training people uh, to become arts-based therapists or teach
Yeah.
arts-based therapy. I used to do a lot of that. Um, but I do engage in a lot of teacher
Mm,
training, working with counselors, working with therapists, and
mm,
sort of looking at the therapeutic use of arts as a material. Mm, I, I mean, so I think there are two hats essentially,
mm,
or maybe three hats I wear. One that of a therapist myself, working with clients, individual clients, and working with a community group therapy in conflict areas as well as in non-conflict spaces. But also, I work as a trainer and training people. And I also work as a
mm.
director of where I'm actually as a theater artist
Yeah.
directing plays and
Yeah.
creating you know theater with children, theater with adults, yeah, but they're plays, like proper performances, which I sort of curate, direct,
Mm.
present. Yeah,
Yeah.
so these are the three hats I wear.
Three main hats. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, you wanted to do today's conversation specifically after the show that you also asked me to watch, and which I think is a buzzword right now. A lot of people are talking about the show. The show is called Baby Reindeer, and it's about this man who's gone through experiences of very long-standing stalking at the hands of a woman who clearly feels like there are some mental health concerns or personality disturbances or something like that. And it's his interface with that experience, but also how it reminds him of previous experiences of being abused or being assaulted. So, what from the show stayed with you, which wanted you to, take up this conversation and talk about
I think one of the most major thing which sort of struck me about it was uh, his idea or his tendency within him
it? Mm,
to feel sorry for her, as she said, but also what I clearly saw from a therapeutic language, the rescuer,
yeah,
and within the framework of the drama triangle of Eric Burns. So the transaction that he had was immediately a rescuer, where he didn't draw the line, he didn't have the boundary or the border
yeah,
to step back when she exceeded or when he felt some sort of a warning
yeah,
or some danger or some sort of thing
mm,
uh, to extend. And I think I've done that a lot,
yeah,
especially before I got trained or
mm,
even during my training or during
mm,
my process as a professional. So
mm,
many a times I feel like I've sort of strayed and or I have even before I became a therapist when I was 21 years old, how I once told this American girl, she was doing a wallowing of herself, and she said, "I'm not pretty enough," and whatever. And I said, "No, you are beautiful." And she became a stalker, and she stalked me throughout. And because I had sort of held her hand at that particular evening, she held it and I didn't let go. I mean, it became a huge thing where it looked like that um, I had sort of, encouraged her and sort of fed on
initiated
to
something.
her,
Yeah,
initiated something,
mm,
and I had to sort of go disappear to hiding because she had come all the way to my house to stay to stand stood on my doorsteps, and it became a very big thing.
mm.
So yeah.
So you're saying that basically, sometimes when something is about to repeat, or somebody is about to be difficult with us or act in a way that is violent or aggressive, it's almost like there is a sort of alarm bell or a sixth sense sort of thing that goes off. And a friend of mine had shared with me that she lives in Himachal, so snakes are very common over there. And once she was moving out of or moving into a house, and there was a snake behind one of the cupboards. And so the first bite that the snake give, apparently,
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
yeah. So she was saying that the first bite that the snakes give is a warning bite. And if you don't back off is when you get the actual bite. So
Mm.
what you said reminded me of that, like there is something of a warning that goes off, and if we don't heed it, maybe because of familiarity with the abuse and trauma, and we go on having presence and availability with that person, that's when probably the slippery slope starts. Is that what you wanted to highlight?
Yeah, I think there is a warning, and I think a lot of people who have been abused or violated do get a warning. But when it, of course, first time happens, we don't get a warning.
Yeah.
When the cycles repeat itself,
Mm,
then it gives warning.
mm.
Um, if we think the snake is a rope or a rope is a snake, then there is an illusion.
Yeah, yeah.
Illusion stops us from actually seeing
The
things.
warning also. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, then we don't necessarily see what is warning. It's like a baby
Yeah.
going towards fire often.
Yeah.
And human beings are pretty vulnerable in that sense. They always sort of disconnected from our instincts in a way. But the intuition is there. It starts coming in, as you know, memory has been formed, of some
Yeah.
sort. So even though you are getting drawn towards the danger or towards whatever it is, there is still a certain kind of a bell that rings, an alarm bell that
Mm,
rings. And I think that is quite true. But often the body programming is such
mm.
that sort of, or the energetic programming,
Yeah.
conditioning of habit is so much so that even
Yeah.
if the warning happens,
Mm.
we can sort of
Not heeded.
not heed it, and go
Yeah.
towards the source of danger.
And you mentioned rescuing, which is why I wanted to ask you this as well, because in my experience of the show, I find that I paid attention to a few reasons why he keeps going back. One, which he explicitly mentions, is that somewhere the flattery did matter to him, or somewhere being important to her as an exception to the story of her life did matter to him. It was maybe an ego rush or something, but he explicitly says that, right, in the show. But it also felt like a part of him was also interested in solving the puzzle of her as a person. Why is she like this? So I felt like those two very strong pulls that kept taking him back. So if we break down rescuing a, what is the enticement or the enchantment of rescuing, which takes us back into these cycles with people?
That's a very good point. I
Hmm.
think one is curiosity.
Hmm.
Curiosity
Hmm.
essentially is a very big idea of, like, thinking about what is behind that.
Yeah.
What, like, it's intriguing,
Yeah.
you know, a certain, yeah, it mystifies you.
Hmm.
So flattery is, because if my self-worth is very low because of the abuse or whatever it is, prior abuses, uh, I'm getting flattered, but my worth is getting reflected by someone's self-worth can be so low
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
that they're flattering me. So
Yeah.
I'm getting better off. I am pushing myself above a little bit
Yeah. Yeah.
in order to see myself. Oh, you know, I'm getting flattered.
Hmm.
I'm getting appreciated. Like someone. So it's a comparison. I think that's what he sort of says towards the end.
Hmm. Hmm.
When he's trying to get some realization, and that's what hit me
Hmm.
a lot more. To your first question, that it's the contrast, and I think with this American girl, years ago when I was 21, and when her sense of worth was so low
Hmm.
that I started feeling better in her presence.
Yeah.
And then as an exchange, you want to make her feel better even more
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because you're not feeling that great,
Mm. Yeah.
inside,
Yeah.
and she makes you feel good, so you want to make her feel good too. So it becomes like a kind of a, and that is
The
something which
dance.
spirals. Yeah, the dance and the
Mm.
spiraling
Mm.
begins between, because the victim essentially is also manipulated, like will run yourself himself down, to make you feel
Better.
special,
Yeah.
so that you would sort of in
Mm.
turn
Mm.
rescue. So the
Yeah.
rescue and the victim sort of have this sort of
Dance.
dance going about, where
Mm.
each one mirrors the other person's low
Yeah.
self-worth.
Mm.
And it is, in a way, it's a trauma bonding.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels
You know?
like it. And what was intriguing to me is that, when he found in the show the sort of life he was looking for, he got the fame, he got the shows, everything was sorted, it felt like. It felt like it was almost feeling like empty to him because it felt like he went back to the same two people again. And my reading of the ending of the show was that this time he chose parts of those very convoluted relationships to make it work for him. Like he got the contract of work out of the guy, and about from the girl, he just listened to those recordings which were flattering and not the harmful ones, right? So, do you feel like that's connected? Him feeling a certain safety after they both had left, and sort of feeling empty, and then going back, or how did you see the ending?
The what was the ending like, if you
After
remind
he
me?
started getting the shows, she kind of
Mm,
called him again.
mm,
She found his number this time around and
mm,
started saying that I'll tell your parents about your sexuality and your abuse experience with a man. So in order to ensure that they don't hear from anyone else, he goes and tells them. And his
mm,
parents are actually nice about it, and they spend a good few days being with each other.
mm,
So it's like her worst threat also is not kind of working anymore. But he tries to report her again because of the voicemails. And they say that keep listening till you find something threatening, then we can arrest her.
mm.
So, I mean, to do that, he could have just like waited for the more threatening message, but he listens to it day in and day out. He starts filing the recordings by mood and by content and things like that. And we actually finds things that would implicate her, doesn't report her, up until the point that she says that she could stab someone. The police have been asking, but he doesn't report her. And then he reports her, she gets arrested. And he goes back to the guy who has seen his show. So he knows that, okay, he has openly talked about him. The guy makes no mention of his role as the rapist and offers him a job, to write on the show. And so he takes that offer and leaves the flat. That's how it ends. And then he listens to only those of her recordings which talk about love and how he resembles the baby reindeer of her childhood.
Yeah. So, do you think I agree with it? Is that what you're saying? Do you
So I
think,
was
how
saying,
does it sort of sit
how
with
do
me?
you read the situation? Like once he did get the calm, peaceful life without both the abusers, and where he gets the fame, etc., that he's looking for. How do you see him going back to these people and in this specific way? It did feel like this time he went back in a more empowering way, but maybe that's my interpretation of it.
I think. I think. To be honest, I don't know. If it if for me, I think the fact that he doesn't report him
Hmm.
but reports her, um, I think there is a guilt that he feels and experiences.
Hmm.
And I think the guilt is that you are taking the lesser abuser. And because at the end of the day, there is the bond that builds between him and her,
Hmm.
which so there is a triangle here. The man there is the oppressor. He is the rescuer, and she's the victim.
Hmm.
And each of them sort of probably have a done. So oppressor was often out of the equation, sort of almost forgiven, almost let go of. Do you see the same thing when it comes to, say, Germany, Israel, and Palestine?
Hmm.
Or the original between Germany, Israel, and America, or the Allied forces of the rescuer. If you look at that triangle,
Hmm.
you see eventually Israel has let go of Germany, is
Yeah.
now become the oppressor and looks at Israel, as looks at Palestine
As the new problem. Yeah.
as a new problem, as a new deemed oppressor, you
Yeah.
know. So if if he had reported this guy, he would have pleaded as a victim,
Mm.
thinking that this guy's wanted it.
Mm.
He's asked for it. Why didn't he stop?
Mm.
You know, and no way would this character, the main character, would have been able to prove the filmmaker
Mm.
uh, guilty of charge, because he has actually. Why
Mm.
couldn't he say no in the beginning? Why
Yeah.
didn't he report? So he found it more futile. In a way, he just wanted a closure for himself,
Mm.
but
Mm.
I don't necessarily think he was empowered. I think he
Yeah.
just wanted to see
Mm.
what would it do. And the fact that he took the job, it is that we internalize the oppressor.
Mm. Mm.
We take the oppressor's role and we internalize it as a victim,
Yeah.
because all three exist in us,
Yeah.
essentially.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, if I ask, I said, have I oppressed someone? Yes. Have I been a victim? Yes. Have I rescued someone? Yes.
Yeah.
So I have all the three in me. So
Mm.
I'm playing the dance within myself. So the trauma triangle is continuing
Yeah. Yeah.
regardless, in
Mm.
conflict. That sort of keeps on happening again and again and again.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think one of the reasons for us to also have this conversation was to see, your work, especially with victims of violence or traumas, in context of your own life, and what made you choose maybe the profession, right?
Mm.
So do you feel like there are traces or memories from your childhood which inform this work, or people you've met and made who've made an impression on your life, impressionable moments? What has the first half of your life, maybe, you know what relationship does that have with you choosing this occupation and working with this specific group of people?
So I think I am definitely a survivor of sexual abuse and incest.
Hmm.
Uh, and also, um, I think also, one of my parents, committed suicide. So I'm also a suicide survivor, in the sense, like, I've survived
Hmm.
suicide in the family, and so there are there are these things which essentially makes me a kind of, I would say, makes me kind of having a certain kind of a qualification to be a victim. Let's
Hmm.
put it that way.
Yeah.
And also makes me have the qualification to be a rescuer,
Hmm.
and also makes me have the qualification to be an oppressor.
Yeah.
Not necessarily, I have not sexually abused any children or any child or anybody else, but there has been time when I think I have been transgressive, you
Hmm.
know, where I feel in many ways, while growing up, I haven't known what the boundaries are,
Yeah.
in terms of, I have not been able to judge or assess.
Hmm.
Is this person being affectionate? Is this person interested? Especially in my youth days,
Yeah. Yeah.
because all of this happened when I was very young. I
Hmm.
was 8 years old or 9 years old when the sexual abuse started. And I lost my mom when I was about 12, or before my 13th birthday. So I did not have sort of understanding of what is affection, what is sexuality, what is um, and because it happened through male contact, I didn't know what does male affection means.
Hmm.
So while growing up over the years, in a sense, friendships, I sort of misunderstood and I could have been transgressive, but I haven't. So I think that can be oppressive, but I don't think I have been actually. I've never had a desire for uh to be sexually abused towards children or something of that
Hmm.
sort. So I've not been an oppressor that way,
Hmm.
but I think the oppressor has been there because the victim has there. The oppressor is there, that I do lose my temper a lot when I direct plays for children, or I get savagely rescue oriented when I see a child which needs rescuing, and I go all of the way to, I find myself in juvenile homes and remand homes. I've worked in a sense,
Hmm.
often, in order to have structured order, there
mm,
has been outbursts of temper. So yes, the oppressor has existed, you know.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
can't say the oppressor doesn't exist.
mm,
Uh, the rescue exists, and of course the victim exists. But I
yeah,
think the rescuer role has been pretty much strong because of my own victimhood. Because many a times I have not been able to, especially earlier on years, many years,
mm,
um, I did not work on myself as much as I
mm,
could
mm,
have, you know, and especially in my 20s.
yeah,
And the traces remained in the 30s and in the
mm,
40s, and now I'm going to be 50 soon. So it sort of remained, the traces remain
remain,
of
yeah,
rescuer, oppressor, and victimhood and whatnot. And
mm,
as I'm getting older and older, I think as I look back upon it, and things are not, the toxic cycles are not as repetitive, as coercive, or as persistent as before.
mm,
Uh, I have a perspective over what has happened. A certain reassessment of memory
mm, mm,
is taking place. I mean, this conversation is a reassessment of memory in a
mm,
way.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, to or when I saw the Baby Reindeer sort of show, I sort of, it came up for me, all of this sort
yeah,
of stuff, and at
mm,
I looked at male survivor and sexual abuse, survivor of sexual abuse,
mm,
or also being stalked upon,
mm,
you know, with an interesting eye where I could compare notes, you know,
mm, mm,
and to say yes, I think today, for example, if I've worked in conflict areas, if I've worked in therapy and I've been successful with my clients, I do think my past has a lot to play in it in terms of its influence of these three
mm,
parts of the drama triangle. You know,
mm.
like yeah. I mean, does it answer the question?
Yeah, to some degree. I also wanted to know if you feel, because often when there are multiple experiences of abuse, that's very different from a single episode or a single experience. And perhaps it also changes based on, were some of the relationships consensual at some point and then it got bad, and so on and so forth. So how do you feel your journey has been to make sense of the different types of the abuse, or maybe the different people at the hands of whom it happened, or maybe your growing age or changing personality at the various points at which things were happening? Like, you were 21 with the stalking, but you were 8 with the first sexual abuse. So how do you think those changes have informed your personhood and work today?
I think I think it's because I've had multiple
Mm,
abuses, not
mm,
to one single person,
mm,
and complex PTSD. So I think each of them, I can't figure out where which is which during the
yeah.
years. What was consensual, what was non-consensual. They get very blurred,
Mm,
and just like in the show, you know,
mm,
it becomes very blurred
yeah.
at some point, and eventually the person sort of gets into it. There's no sort of identity left, only action.
Mm,
There's no sense of I in terms of agency. You just become an action,
yeah.
and you sort of act out, you know.
Mm,
So
mm,
I think there has been just acting out in my life in a way
mm,
for a long period of time. I think when I actively and consciously, so I also was a telecounselor at the age of 21,
mm,
around the same year or two
mm,
years before the Senate. So, and I started therapy when I was 21, 22, like that kind of thing. So it was all around the same time. So I think therapy and work on myself has a lot to do with
mm,
uh, becoming the witness. I don't think, I think the witness is evolved. So coming back to drama therapy, is one of the reasons why I do drama therapy is because theater gives you witness. It gives you the witness. It gives you the, the observer, that is. It gives you the actor, you know. Both together become the spectro actor.
mm,
And it allows you to also look at the mirror, the
mm,
reflection audience. So the drama triangle is replaced by the actor, the mirror,
mm,
mm, and the witness. So
mm,
I think these three came in
mm.
handy.
Yeah. And do you think the acting out would happen with people who weren't involved in the abuse, like more of like a sort of displacement or passing on the parcel, you know? Or do you think some of the acting out did happen with the people with whom you felt these feelings?
Sorry, repeat the question.
You
Can you
said that
just?
at some point the action is what, like the identity left and the action is what kept taking place, a sort of acting out. So do you feel the acting out happens in relation to who you find abusive, or do you feel the acting out happens with people who don't have anything to do with the abuse, and who are just maybe the storehouse or the replay or helping you
I
get.
think it can happen with both.
Hmm, hmm,
It's not always the source who's repeating, but also number of people who are the prototypes, or
hmm,
uh, you know, remind me of
hmm,
that particular abuser, or remind me of that particular thing. So it
hmm.
keeps repeating itself again and again
Yeah, yeah.
at various spaces,
Hmm, hmm,
and yeah, I think I think it's repetitive.
hmm,
uh, Trauma, memory, and repetition are connected,
hmm,
so it repeats itself
hmm,
accordingly. You
yeah,
know,
yeah. And do you feel it changed with time and with as the witnessing part of you grew and maybe as you did more theater? Do you feel like now you respond differently if something feels like it may go south, or if it feels like somebody's being a bit pushy, this can turn out into an abusive dynamic? Do you find yourself responding differently?
I think I definitely do. I
Mm,
think definitely I can put a hold to it.
mm,
I feel that is one of the reasons why I think I can see very clearly
mm,
that, oh, this can go abusive, or this is toxic,
mm,
or this is a transference or a projection going on which has got nothing to do with me really.
mm,
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 and it has gone on off in a while now.
mm,
It You rather cut it off,
mm.
cut the relationship off rather than it festering,
Yeah,
and and move on. You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
um, I think also you start see being born in a male body
Mm,
uh, would also mean to some extent people who have been, I would be drawn towards women who have been abused, or men who've been abused.
mm,
And then they would see me in a certain way after a point of time, depending on the shift, meaning subconsciously and collective. So there's always projection and counter projection
mm,
happening, because we live in a hall of mirrors. Like this,
yeah.
there's a very famous Sufi story about a dog who enters the hall of mirrors and sees its reflection everywhere and starts barking, and everybody barks back. All the reflections bark back till the dog dies, and all the voices die within the dog. So it's a very powerful story, and a metaphor,
Mm,
an allegory
yeah,
of how we sort of keep recreating our own reflections,
yeah,
which keep barking at us, and
yeah.
and attacking us. So I feel like now, before it goes, or even if it is grown a little bit, I can stop it. But it
Mm,
has only come after 3-4 years of
mm,
of doing shadow work,
mm,
and I think
mm,
that it's still a work in progress. I mean,
mm,
I'm doing 2 years of psychoanalysis, and I've done 3 years of shadow work. So
mm,
altogether, it's been 5 years of
mm,
of intense work on myself in a very uh, one-on-one space, and it sort of lend itself from, I think, after the abrogation took place in Kashmir, and I had some time to reflect.
mm,
Uh, from 2019, I started very intense work on myself,
mm,
and it's only the last 5 years, but events and incidents started growing more and more.
mm,
Then I
mm,
started getting,
mm.
I started becoming very introspective and self-reflexive as to
Yeah,
what's
yeah,
going on.
yeah.
And I think now, at this particular point, I mean, touch wood for now. I mean, I've cleared out all
Mm,
the more or less the toxic relationships that have been, could
mm,
be, or can be.
mm,
Uh, yeah, so I can actually have a conversation
mm.
with you very clearly about it. It's not a confessional thing; it's more like a journey, and I think the journey has been very empowering,
Yeah.
even though it has been extremely painful. I think I had to go through it,
Mm,
because part of repeating the woundedness
mm.
was to seek closure. I think that's what trauma does. It wants to repeat itself in order to
Yeah,
clear itself off.
yeah, yeah,
But sometimes it just goes in cycles again and again. And
yeah,
that's what you meant by recruiting the same
yeah,
sort of people.
yeah. And do you feel like you mentioned the male being born in the male body and that kind of having a very specific way of things playing out? So it also seems like men's pains are often quite unseen. Like in some, and it's a very dubious thing because in some way men have a lot of space in the culture, but not for these things, right? The things that they are allowed to complain about is like the wife is not giving food, whatever, right? But the real complaints of men, which are about all these unseen things, right? The wounds they carry and what they've been through, really like the jarring stuff that they've been through. It seems like there isn't enough space for the real pains, you know. So is there anything that you'd like to say to men in particular because of your life experience?
Yeah, I think it's very rightly said. I think some aspects of men are unseen, and some aspects of men's wounds are indulged.
Hmm.
You know, so there is an entitlement to be born a man, especially in this country. I think everywhere, but culturally speaking, South Asian men are very entitled. If you are cisgendered,
Hmm.
particularly, and if you are born in a male body, and if you're heteronormative,
Hmm.
all those kind of thing. I mean,
Hmm.
or straight passing gay
Hmm.
men also.
Hmm.
They are experiencing a certain kind of an entitlement
Hmm.
of an accessibility or visibility, which immediately makes them, um, like, or if you're English speaking class with, you know, posh English speaking, have a certain kind of a access to cultural capital,
Hmm.
you know, all these kind of factors really make you, to some extent, um, indulged upon, or like, you're engaged very differently because
Hmm.
it's not only a body.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's not you're not walking around on
Hmm.
your face that you're abused or whatever it is, or
Yeah.
that you can be targeted upon, or that you are marginalized. But in a way, what actually is very entitled and accessible itself is the shadow, has a shadow.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was coming to, that
Yeah,
like the entitlement itself speaks of something.
yeah,
Often it's seen as the exception to the healing or the
yeah.
part that is not wounded, but it feels like the entitlement may be part of the wounding.
That's right. And
Mm.
so men cannot access their own healing journeys that easily,
Mm.
often as women can do,
Mm.
or transgendered people, not transgendered often, but I think women often, the
Mm.
feminine can access it. I
Mm.
think that way. I think sometimes, in, in queer population, I personally feel that, um, it's also a liminal. I mean, it's a liminoid space.
Mm.
It's not a space that the person can easily access healing.
Mm.
I think the feminine,
Yeah.
women in particular, I've seen
Mm.
access healing far easily than
Yeah.
men do.
Yeah. I think
And
wherever victimization becomes a bit too crystallized as a group norm, it's harder,
yeah,
right? Because if you
that's right.
transcend your wound, then you may not be part of the group anymore.
That's right.
And for men, I think it's the opposite, that not talking about the victimization is the group identity, right?
That's right.
So if either of these folks were to transcend the wound, then they'll lose the group, perhaps.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Because you don't belong anymore then, you
Yeah.
know. And I think for me, I didn't belong into any group. I'm not in a liminoid space,
Mm.
and I don't have uh, my identity. I sort of did not draw from many things, and perhaps because of being nomadic and become an urban nomadic sort of space, constantly shifting, sort of helped that I could access healing in a very individualistic, non-gendered way,
Mm.
in a personal sort of a way.
Mm.
And that was my power. That
Mm.
was where I could sort of
Mm.
empower myself, because it was not accessing healing as a man. It was not accessing as a
Mm.
bi or a gay or a queer person or anything of the sort, or
Mm.
or as someone who's abused. And I didn't hold my
Mm.
victimhood or wounding as an identity.
Mm.
So
Mm.
therefore, I sort of allowed myself to move.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if
And
you access healing too much from that place, then you might also find people who will keep you like that. Like
that's right. That's right.
maybe a therapist who is self-absorbed or who is too much into coddling you and never like letting you change or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So if that's too central a focus to looking for the healing, then that can show in the way that the healing happens, or in fact doesn't happen for that
Yeah.
matter.
Because I worked on shadow.
Mm.
I worked on psychoanalysis as a tool, or shadow work, or Jungian work, or
mm,
somatic experience. So the tool, or art therapy or watercolor therapy. So the tool was a more
mm,
accessible space rather than the issue itself.
mm,
You know,
mm,
so I was learning more methods,
mm,
upay or
mm,
tools
mm,
to heal myself or to
mm,
heal the other, whatever it is, rather than actually to look at sexual wounding or trauma, suicide, or death, or whatever it is. So in a way, I never directly worked with that issue.
mm.
Neither did I skirt around it, but it was a method which sort of took me around where
Yeah.
it took me around. You know,
Yeah.
in a way, it had more space. I wasn't trying to fix myself.
Yeah. I think it was more about knowing yourself with and despite what happened. I
Yeah.
think a lot of the times healing is about almost erasing the trauma.
Mm.
But I don't think we can erase it.
No.
We can learn to live with it, and we can hope not to be fully defined by it. But
And yeah, staying with it allows you to look at what gifts it has given.
yeah.
But it's very hard to say what gifts can a trauma bring. But it does bring you gifts.
Mm,
Loss does bring you a certain sense of vulnerability,
yeah.
and and working with it allows you to have a discipline in that vulnerability,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, a certain
Mm,
structure in it. That is also what acting or theater does.
mm,
It allows you to get into the vulnerability, but have a discipline with it.
mm.
You
Yeah.
know,
It's not an indulgent sense. Like it's more of
yeah.
like, yes, this is there and this is part of my life, but also, I am someone and I want to engage with this in a very practiced way. It seems like that's what you're saying. So, is there anything you want, like for people who may have abused someone in any fashion, or who may themselves be abused? And often we know that relates, right? Like abused people do become or do pick up abuse as a way to sometimes be with others. So, do you want to say anything to these groups of people if they're listening?
So there are two things I want to say. First, I want to say if you're a man
Mm,
listening to this conversation, and if you have been wounded, mm, sexually, emotionally, physically, being abused or violated or been stalked upon and had sort of, you
mm,
know, being obsessed, part of an obsession of someone else's psyche, and been objectified in some ways, um, know that the world starts with you.
mm,
You are the world. You are the world that is creating this.
yeah.
And therefore, the agency is you.
Mm,
You
mm,
know, it's not God happening.
mm,
There's no God making this happen for you,
mm, mm,
punishing or rewarding you.
mm,
There is no, there is karma, but you are the karma. You can create it. There
mm,
is a cause and effect, but you're an agency, and you
mm,
can you can reach out, get help,
mm,
get a help, or get the right mirrors to access yourself.
mm,
And you are your own obstacle. You're your own opportunity.
mm.
It's very important to
Know that.
uh, know that,
Yeah.
and that even though healing is a more difficult journey than actually the wounding,
Mm,
it appears so. Often
yeah.
healing is more painful than the wounding itself,
Mm,
because you're going to the wound, you're touching upon it, you're trying to work it, you rework it, reassess it, do something with it, whatever. It's painful
mm, mm,
because the scars have been formed, they've created hardened tissue. If the scars are removed or tissue is removed, then it's a raw, it's painful. So these things are painful.
mm,
And but eventually it gives
mm,
you freedom,
mm,
and it allows to find strength and gifts in that. It
mm,
allows the muscles to rebuild itself, to become
mm,
the psychological muscles become uh, you know, more resilient, if
mm,
lack
mm.
of better word.
Yeah.
You know, Whereas the second thing is to the responses to those guys who are either the oppressor or the victim or the rescuer, either three of them. Uh, I think it's important to know that each of these things is an element of suffering.
Mm,
That the oppressor also suffers,
yeah.
that the victim also suffers, the rescuer also suffering. You know, and we have chances to be happy. We have possibilities to be happy.
Mm,
We have to swallow the pill and to say, oh, it's a failure.
mm,
And like relationships when they don't work, to say it's a failure, to accept the failure, to live with that sense of failure.
mm,
And that allows you to say, like when I don't sort of when I let go of relationships or it doesn't work or I've seen it becoming toxic or whatever it is, to say, yeah, I failed at that. It was a lesson to be learned, point to be
Mm.
taken, to be noticed.
Yeah.
I have my own contribution to it.
Yeah.
I
Mm.
must have stepped overstepped my boundaries.
Mm.
I came from certain sort of my own wounding, to acknowledge that, to accept it,
Mm.
uh, and to say, you know, there is a difference between vulnerability and fragility.
Mm.
You
Mm.
know, and I think vulnerability is much more open, and the fragility, in a sense, is much more tenuous and can be broken. And
Yeah,
the
it's a very
fragility,
narrow one, right? Like you're feeling
yeah,
fragile. There's this one gesture that the person can do to make you feel seen or heard,
yeah,
and nothing else counts, and they're supposed to guess it also.
that's
It's a
right,
very
yeah,
narrow window of what feels
yeah.
right.
Yeah, and fragility is very fragility. When I use the word fragility, it's almost very patronizing. It's sort of sense of like you're weak. So I
Mm.
wouldn't say I'm fragile about
Mm.
or I'm carry. I don't think I carry the fragility about
Mm.
me and these possibilities of toxic relationships, which might come, has come, gone, or whatever it is.
Mm.
But I do see myself as much more. I have been vulnerable to them, and
Mm.
I think that even if there is a failure sometimes to, you know, rebuild these relationships at
Mm.
times, but there is a lesson to be learned
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
because trauma is repetitive, because memory is repetitive. Nothing is really fixed. It sort
Mm.
of will repeat itself again and again. I
Yeah.
think I think there is a sense of uh, accepting that I'm vulnerable
Mm.
always,
Yeah.
but not fragile.
Mm.
I accept that I have vulnerability, but I have discipline.
Mm.
If I have if I have fragility, then I can be broken.
Mm.
And even if I can be broken or am broken, I can still, uh, you know, re-glue myself
Yeah.
because I am not my pain. I am not my suffering.
Yeah. Mm.
I am the witness.
Mm.
Who's the witness, the observer is
Mm.
affecting, can affect observed.
Mm. Yeah. And it feels like when I've sat with stories of men's pain, generally they're not allowed to be victims, right? Regardless of the gender of the abuser. But I feel the struggle is much more if there's a woman who's been at the abusing end, because it almost feels like the internalized maybe masculinity, patriarchy tells them that both things, that oh, this is too small a thing to bother about, like what harm can she do, and also how could you not stop something so minuscule, and I feel like it. Do you feel that way too, that it's a bit harder if the abuse has come from a woman?
You know, most mothers
Hmm.
who are beaten by their husbands can often beat their own children,
Hmm.
their own sons. I mean, I think in my case, this was probably the case.
Hmm.
I think my parents had an abusive relationship with each other, and I think my mother was definitely abusive towards me,
Hmm.
especially towards the end of her life.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a very hardcore thing to say,
Hmm.
but it's sort of valid and sort of legit if your mother slaps your own child in
Hmm.
this culture, for
Yeah.
example. वो तो वो तो माँ है उसको थप्पड़ तो मारेगी
Hmm. Hmm.
या और से हाँ एक पति है एक बात एक तो थप्पड़ मार देगा तो क्या होगा
Hmm.
especially North India and other places. Like, I mean, it's very common to accept abuse by the
Hmm.
legitimacy of the role,
Legitimization of.
legitimization by the role or the kidship they play. So if you say this harder by a woman, I don't know whether it's harder if your mother beats her own child, whether it's
Hmm.
hard. I think it's not hard at all. We don't think it's abusive. Like one boy in the gender violence sort of thing got up and said, one guy in a sense, that I've been abused by my mother, and everybody laughed, or the women laughed. Not mother, by abused by women, and they all laughed
Hmm.
because it's like, how is that possible? Like, how can you be like, because there it was like a scoff. But
Hmm.
then when he actually said that when he was young, his mother
Hmm.
took a burning coal and burnt his thighs
Hmm.
because the father wasn't there and she was angry and whatnot. Um, that was quite something,
Yeah.
And I remember listening to it and I felt this kind of vibration going through my body. Because you see, you can't beat your mother if you're young, and you can't be violent towards her. She's being violent towards you. She's scorching you with something, with a fire, which is clearly abusive. It's an extreme excess, or beat you in a very violent way, which is not permissible. Which has happened to me. I mean, then you think of these things as said, and then you realize there is no one in society which would invalidate that, or whatever it is, or even,
Mm,
will say yes. So in a way, it's harder if it comes from your parents,
mm,
unless there or one of the parents is your mother, or who's a woman. I mean, so I feel like it's a very complex question to
mm,
ask in a way, because it's not about gender; it's about power.
mm, yeah.
It's about who is holding the power.
Mm. Yeah, and I
Because
feel that there is a power that is held by people who are culturally considered to be harmless, right? Like
that's right.
women are
I was,
culturally considered
yeah,
harmless. Yeah.
I mean, culturally considered harmless, psychologically considered weak, or whatever it is, all these
Mm,
kind of things. Because I was walking with this orphan boy who was in Kashmir, and we're walking by the teacher and said, "That's my school teacher. She used to, when I was young, in grade three, she used to kick like a kung fu guy. I used to be kicked about. She used to kick us." And I'm looking at this thin, burqa clad, spindly, sour looking woman, and can't imagine. And this tall boy walking with me, and he's shuddering in fear.
mm,
He's moving away like that because she used to kick him as a child.
mm. Yeah.
And and you think that all the anger these women face from men are sometimes taken on little boys.
Mm. Or the men in their life who won't violate, like when you
Yeah,
try to support that girl and she's turned stalker. So the men who won't violate unfortunately get the brunt of this.
yeah, because
Mm.
then they become the prey.
Yeah.
So I think the question of gender relationship is not in binaries. It's a question of power, and it's a question of who wants to take that power. It's a complex question. It's a very
Yeah.
complex response.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so I don't see, for example, if you say can about about the question you said about women being violent, or it's like you think that, okay, transgendered community cannot be violent towards another transgender person, or a transgendered community, just because they're marginalized, cannot be violent towards their own spouses or
Mm.
people who are cisgender. That's not true. Anyone can be violent, anyone can be abusive,
Mm.
mm, regardless,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. And often when I think of how entrenched these patterns are, even when we get all the help we sometimes need to, like work on them, then also they're so entrenched. And of course, there are so many people who are not getting the help, right? So it does make me wonder if there are choices other than in reference to the wound all the time. Which brings me to kind of my last question from my end is that, do you ever wonder about your life without these abusive experiences, or that's just like an exercise in imagination that's not possible because what you know about yourself is in reference to your life as you lived it?
be honest, Sadaf, I think that if I hadn't had those experiences, uh, if I hadn't uh, if I hadn't had those experiences, I probably would have had a very banal existence in that sense. Sometimes I think, you
Hmm.
know, uh, yeah,
Hmm.
so I might not.
Hmm.
So I might have a very sort of sorry, there's someone else.
Do
I
you
might
want to
have a
take a minute?
no, it's okay.
Yeah.
So I think the experiences would have been very
Hmm.
banal. Probably life would have been not so. I don't know what I really don't know what life would have been without these experiences. But if I think about it deeply, I wouldn't have been a therapist for sure.
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't think I would have done the work that I've done
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
all. I
Hmm.
don't think so.
Yeah.
If my mom hadn't passed away and the way she did, and if I hadn't been sort of, uh, you know, sexually abused, or I haven't gone through abusive relationships in a sense, I don't think I would have been a therapist. therapist, because
Mm,
essentially the attempt of being a therapist was to heal oneself. I think
mm,
that's the idea. That was the idea. It turned out to be for a long time,
mm,
or
mm.
social service. It turned out to be like a rescuing thing for the other, and healing was in reflection. Mm. It's only later years that I started directly working on to
Yeah.
myself consciously. But
Mm,
uh, but I don't think I. Yeah. So your answer is that what would I have been? I don't even know whether I would have been an artist or what would have
mm.
been.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I feel like I think these kind of experiences, even though are painful, have taught me a lot, have
Mm,
enriched me a lot, and have made me much more courageous, and uh, also made me more compassionate towards other people, mm, and also helped me to understand what self-love is.
yeah.
You know, because I think most of the time we love our egos, I love our notions of ourselves, but we don't know what the self is. We don't know what love is.
Mm,
So I think the kind of the idea of the quest, the idea of seeking,
mm,
comes from these sort of experiences.
yeah.
But I'm not so sure everybody's very fortunate. I think I'm very fortunate.
Yeah. I think we don't get sometimes the resources, financial or otherwise, to work on these wounds, or something or the other doesn't align, and unfortunately we do repeat it sometimes intergenerationally as well. Like, it takes many generations before someone realizes. So that's at least the state of the world today, it seems like. Do you have anything else you want to share which we didn't get to in the questions, or that's coming
No,
as the last thoughts?
no, I think this is a wonderful sort of an expression, and sort of like this is what I wanted to sort of talk uh, about about the role of men and the
Mm,
role of uh, violence and
mm,
sexual abuse, um, and how they sort of it sort of either can yeah that I basically did in a more personal way. What I wanted to sort of talk about was that the uh, disorder, the post-traumatic stress, the PTSD, becomes a PTSD. It becomes the growth, the
mm,
break, the the breakdowns of one's life, the breakdown of relationships can also become the breakthrough.
yeah.
And it's important to take distance from oneself and from sort of spaces where things have been enmeshed relationships, enmeshed boundaries. It's important to step back. It's important to take distance. It's important to reassess memory. It's
Mm,
important to sort of own up to one's accountability,
mm,
where one's boundaries have been stepped,
yeah.
and and I think it's important that one does that. And I think what I wanted to basically reach out to the world was this particular message that if you can be the witness,
Mm,
if you can reflect,
yeah.
you don't have to always go to a therapist for that.
Mm,
One can also do it in daily life or
yeah.
through art or through various forms of
Mm,
uh, you know self-help groups or other ways.
mm,
uh, all our pain can become a possibility
yeah. Yeah.
for happiness.
And one last thought I had, and let me know if you have anything to add to it, is, do you see specific ways for men in particular in which the witnessing is avoided? Because I have seen that perhaps money is one of the ways, that the preoccupation with earning money, getting status, and then having to perpetuate the money, then passing it on. I see that that whole exercise sometimes stops men from witnessing themselves. But
Yeah,
do
yeah.
you feel like you've seen any other common ways that men can watch out for, which might be taking them away from the witnessing?
Money,
Mm,
relationship, intoxication,
mm,
um, then religion. And
mm.
there are different false refuges,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Mm,
and all these refuges, not just men, they take and most people away from
yeah.
witnessing. Yeah,
Mm,
but chasing money is a very socially legitimate thing to
yeah.
build careers,
Mm,
because all the schools and structures, so whole system of civilization perpetuates trauma, as Gabor Mate says.
yeah.
It allows trauma to keep it allows the trauma culture to remain.
Yeah, to fester.
Um,
Yeah. Mm. And to
yeah,
become codified. I think there's a writer who says that trauma decontextualized over time looks like a culture. And so a lot of practices that we feel are Indian culture for our relatives or family to be intrusive, or as you were saying, to use physical violence very normally. And we almost defend it when somebody from the West, say, points it out that, oh, this is not okay. And we say that, oh, you're not being culturally competent because you don't know much about our culture. What right have you to point fingers? And at some point, that critique is fair because it may be coming from a white understanding. But also, it should make us question why this is codified as culture and so normalized as well, right?
Yeah, because they are because trauma has presented itself as culture. That is true. It does.
Yeah.
Like Indian culture. Let's not talk about sex. Let's
Mm.
not talk about premarital sex. If it has happened, this is not our culture.
Yeah. Mm.
All of that is nothing but feudalism.
Mm.
Women's agencies being taken away, or children's agencies, or men's agency, or anybody's agency taken away. The right to pleasure being questioned all the time as an act of sin. I
Mm.
mean, these things are very trauma-inducing.
Yeah.
A woman doesn't have a right to pleasure.
Mm.
She only has a right to procreate, or she's pushed to that. Or men don't have the right to, have a relationship with other men.
Yeah.
Because it's not right thing to do.
Mm.
All these things are a part of
Mm.
homophobia, patriarchal,
Mm.
trauma-inducing cultures.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one is not encouraging promiscuity, or one is not encouraging infidelity,
Mm.
when one is sort of talking about these things. But it almost like conservative culture would say that you're
Yeah.
talking about sex and sexual health and
Mm.
sexuality in a permissive way.
Mm.
So the act of health is
Mm.
often seen as trauma, as often seen as kind of
Spoiled.
um, sorry.
Getting spoiled, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
I mean, you're not really you're looking at health as an aspect of disruption. But
Yeah.
maybe if trauma is the norm, then health is a disruption. To talk of health is
Exactly.
a disruption. It is a
Yeah.
rupture,
Yeah.
and therefore people will be like, no, why are you breaking the norm, the new
Mm.
norm, in a sense,
Yeah.
or the norm of trauma? Why are you taking it away?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think health is also looked at very suspiciously. Like
Mm.
openly talking about the body is really considered not right. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to sort of put this in perspective.
Yeah,
I
witness
mean,
one's participation, I guess, in upholding that structure, as well as, because your upholding stops your witnessing, but it also may perpetuate, right? Your upholding may perpetuate this to go on as well. So it harms you, and then it also harms other people.
yeah, yeah, that's right.
So this sounds like a good place to pause. We'll put this up. I hope that people who need to hear this, people who've been through abuse and have wondered about its impacts, get to hear this, and especially men, because I think in the time that I have worked with men, I think it's the most silent journey that they have to make is with
Yeah.
this kind of wounding, which is not culturally publicly allowed. So thanks a lot for sort of embodying the vulnerability that you were speaking about in doing this openly and being okay with being put out.
Welcome. You're most welcome. Thank you so much. Okay. Take care. Thanks.